there's so many more people here than just at my table. I didn't realize who was behind me. Hi, everybody. How are you? Are you comatose because you've been chewing for half an hour? You awake? Say good morning. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. If you travel internationally all the time and you sleep very little, it's safe to say good morning because it's always good morning somewhere. So I'm guilty of doing that. I'm really, really honored to be here, and amongst all of the thanks that have already been made, I want to also thank the employees of the Washington Hilton for taking such good care of us. I want to thank Aisha and the board of Victory for having me and for having the good sense to open this conversation up globally. I am a New Yorker, which is not necessarily shocking. Although I'm wearing navy and not black, I just would like to point that out. But when 9/11 happened in New York, one of the things that got said was that it was an action that made New York realize it was part of the rest of the country. And maybe the rest of the country realized New York was part of it. And I think that this election is actually an interesting moment where a lot of people are realizing we're also part of the world. And so what the repercussions are and the context setting for the work of the LGBTI community globally, where we sit in a global landscape, and how we can make sense of this moment, not just as an election that's happened in the United States, but really looking at other elections that have happened around the world and that are about to happen. And to really, the purpose of this panel is to look at a global context for the LGBTQI community and the political shifts that are happening globally. So, without further ado, the members of this panel are, I feel like, and the winner is, well, they've all won. So, Randy Boissonnaud is a member of Parliament in the House of Commons, and he's also the newly appointed LGBTQ advisor to Canada's Prime Minister. Alex Greenwich is a member of, for Sydney, of the new South Wales Legislative Assembly in Australia. I wish we'd practiced a big musical number for you. That's what I'm thinking right now. Nick Herbert is a member of the Parliament in the House of Commons in the UK. And Claudia López is the first LGBT senator in Colombia. So we're going to, a little bit, slightly different than the last panel. We're just going to actually speak a little bit about what's happened in each of your respective countries as of late. This has been a big year for everyone. There's been the rejection of the peace process in Colombia. There's the double dissolution election in Australia. There's Brexit in the UK. And everyone's really excited that we're all going to move to Canada. So, but I joke. But also, it would be wonderful to hear specifically, while it isn't a contentious moment necessarily, it is a pivot in your country, and your appointment is a newly appointed position. So we'd love to hear too what that means contextually. Claudia, would you like to start?
What a privilege. Thank you so much. It's so great to be here and so honored to speak before you. Well, Colombia is a great country, as you know. It's in Latin America. We are the oldest and the last armed conflict in this hemisphere. And today, this morning, our president was rewarded the Nobel Peace Prize, a recognition of all the victims in Colombia. So I'm glad to be speaking here at this moment. And it speaks of the endurance of our victims and our people. We're just ending a 52-year-old armed conflict that has left at least 6 million people as a victim. So when we're speaking on Colombia about anything about rights, I want to remember that we are actually like 3 different countries. It's one country, it's an stateless country in which a third of our people live, meaning actually around 15 million people live in a world of no rights, basically because they don't have any state presence to protect them and to enforce their rights. There is roughly 70% of our population who actually live in cities in the 20th or 21st century with far better institutions and protections. And I think one of the challenges that actually we have as a generation now, I actually believe to the country that is more modern and has institutions and state protection, is not only to fight for our own rights and our own agenda, but actually leading and understanding we need to look back and give our hand and our leadership and our work for other people that are far behind us in any sense. And to understand and to put in front their priorities, even before our own agenda. There are 15 million people who are asking us not for justice, not for equality, but basically for take them away from a shooting. They live in a 52-year shooting environment. So I think one of our challenges is to put them in our priorities. Second is to set up our own agenda within their agenda. And third is understanding probably Colombia, even though has this challenging issue of civil war, in terms of legal advancement of our rights. Colombia is far leading in Latin America in all the legal decisions for protecting LGBT rights. We can do at this moment anything, right? From marrying to adopting, everything. But as much, it means that we have been quite successful in strategic litigation before courts, but we are far away in having such a strong support, both socially and politically. So now we need to match up our strategic litigation success with social and political success too.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to join your conference. It's a great privilege. I'd like to draw attention to 3 events in the UK and not just talk about Brexit most recently, mainly so that I don't depress myself for all of you. The first thing that I think is significant, really significant, that happened 3 years ago in our Parliament, which I'm a member, have been for 11 years, is that we passed the same-sex marriage legislation for England and Wales. The significance is that it was passed with cross-party support with an overwhelming majority. Legislation that was introduced by a Conservative Prime Minister. It completed the full set of legislative rights for LGBT people in our country. There is some work still to do, but essentially all the major protections against harassment, discrimination in the workplace, and the marriage protections are now all of there. They are all there. And I was very proud to lead the Freedom to Marry campaign, which was one of the major campaigns arguing for that equal marriage in our country. And at the time, 2 things were said. The first was that members of Parliament who voted for this would regret it, and the second was that they would pay a price at the ballot box. And 2 years later, the Conservative government that had introduced this legislation was elected with a bigger majority. And far from members of Parliament regretting the decision they took, one after another, the members of Parliament who voted against the legislation have recanted and said that they realised that they were wrong. And that's just something about the time of events. Because in the end what we had was changing public opinion, that the House of Commons was leading and properly reflecting that the underlying change was change in our society and then the attitudes. Then we had the general election in 2015. The Conservative government was, as I said, re-elected, and 35 members of the House of Commons out of 650 were openly gay, including me, and 13 of those were Conservative. So we now have openly gay members of the House of Commons across all the major parties, and subsequent to that we decided that what we would do is form a new Equality Caucus. So we set up the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Global LGBT Rights, which I chair, that has been focusing particularly on the egregious breaches of human rights that we see around the world in sub-Saharan Africa and Russia, and what can be done about that. And one of the things I'm very keen to do now is to tie up with our fellow legislators in other countries to see if we can't set up some kind of network to support each other. But the significance of what we've achieved is it's done by cross-party consensus. And what has happened in the UK is that we have successfully depoliticised these issues. And that, in the end, has got to be the ambition. In this room will be sitting people who are fervent and loyal members of their parties. And it's right that you are, and you want to see your party elected above all else. But in this room will also be sitting many people who are gay and want to see gay rights protected. And in the end, to secure the protection of those rights, we need to make certain that there is a bipartisan consensus about it. That's what the goal should be, to achieve that. And it may look a very difficult prospect in the United States at the moment, but what our country shows is that you can move political parties as the times move. And if a Conservative Party in the UK can agree with all of these rights, can vote for equal marriage, can have gay MPs, then it can be done in other countries as well. And the third thing that's happened, the depressing thing, has been Brexit. And you will know that earlier this year, on the 23rd of June, the UK voted narrowly but decisively to leave the European Union. I was on the side of staying in. I led one of the major campaigns, working with the Prime Minister then, to try and stay in. I was deeply disappointed by the result. But there is a big difference, similarities though there may be, to the kinds of forces that were at work, populist, nativist forces that we saw at work in the UK, that you've seen here in the United States as well. There was one big difference, which is that this was a permanent decision that was taken in the referendum. There's no opportunity to reverse it unless public opinion changed fundamentally in the future. We have to honour that decision. So even though I voted against leaving the EU, campaigned against it, I'm a Democrat, and I have to recognise that when you give the decision to the British public, you can't then stick two fingers up at them and say, we're just going to ignore the results. So we have to work to make a success of it. And the good news is that I don't believe this will in any way affect the protection of LGBT rights or other minorities in the UK. Most of those protections have been introduced by domestic legislation. We remain a party to the European Convention on Human Rights, which is separate to membership of the EU, and I'm absolutely sure that those protections will continue even though we're no longer going to be members of the EU.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alex Greenwich. I'm from the New South Wales Parliament, which is a state parliament in Australia. This is my third Victory Conference. I just want to thank you all for making us all feel so welcomed here from an international perspective. We haven't had Brexit or Trump in Australia, but stuff has still happened there. We had something called a double dissolution election this year, and that's when basically the Prime Minister is struggling to get legislation through the Senate. He goes to Governor General, says, the Parliament's not working for me, I want an election. The Parliament then completely dissolves, and all seats in the Senate and the House are up for grabs. That returned a very, very, very narrow victory for the Conservative Party, and they were re-elected by 2 seats in the House of Reps. They don't have a majority in the Senate, though, and one of the correlations that has happened in Australia is we have had a bit of a resurgence in some of that right-wing populism and nationalism, with the One Nation Party receiving 4 senators. These are people who believe climate change is a UN conspiracy, who who play to the Islamophobia as well. But there's only 4 of them. They're not running our country. Sorry.
You stop that,
we also were able to return, even though under a Conservative government, we were able to return a majority of people in both our House and our Senate who support marriage equality, which was a wonderful result. Unfortunately, the re-elected government had a policy of having a plebiscite, which is the national public vote on the issue of marriage equality, something that is not necessary and something that was designed to be a stalling tactic to delay the reform happening. We were able to successfully get that plebiscite voted down, and now we can proceed to a parliamentary path for marriage equality, and hopefully sometime soon. It's quite shocking being the only person on the panel from a country that doesn't have marriage equality, and I know that people are very confused that, you know, we gave the world Kylie and Olivia Newton-John, and we don't have same-sex marriage. But I hope we will get there very soon, and it will be through exactly what Nick spoke about, how they delivered it in the UK, which was from a multi-partisan process where people were working together. And indeed, we've got Nick coming down to Australia in February as well. We're really looking forward to that, and him helping us to facilitate some of those conversations as well.
Well, thanks everyone for the invitation. I'm both a political newbie and a first-timer at Victory Institute, so I want to thank everyone for the warm invitation and the welcome. My overwhelming message is that we're all in this together, regardless of borders, regardless of religious persuasion, regardless of the color of our skin or who we worship or who we sleep with. We're all in this together. And this was brought home to me in June, on June 1st, when with 6 weeks' notice we decided we would do something that was never done before in Canada, and that would be to get the Prime Minister of the country to raise the pride flag on Parliament Hill. Now think about that. Every single square inch of that Parliament precinct is run by 5 different committees. We got it done. The Prime Minister raised the flag on Parliament Hill on June 1st, and it went viral globally. And I stayed by the flag for 3 or 4 hours, taking photos with people. International tour groups stopped and left their tour groups and took a picture with the flag and pointed at themselves, and then went back to their groups. Groups from China, from Japan, from the Middle East. One person brought his dog up and says, my dog likes male dogs better, so he's a pride dog. I'm like, awesome. But this person from the Middle East came up and said, would you please help Middle East Canada? Now, the reason I'm here is to learn from everybody here, because I can tell you what I learned already on the new media panel. I'm going to be putting some of that to work. And the Prime Minister has tasked me with shining light on a very dark part of Canada's past, which is that 9,000 federal public servants, both in the military, our national police force, and our federal public service, were fired for being gay or lesbian or transgender, systematically from 69 until 91. That's going to be a hard conversation to have. We're going to have the conversation. We're going to figure out, like we've seen in the state of Victoria, in Germany, in Austria, how to do an apology that's broadly accepted by all members of the community, and then we're going to build for the future. And to do that, we need to understand best practices. We need to understand fantastic tools that get deep citizen engagement. And so I'm here to learn. I'm here to listen. I mean, we decriminalized homosexuality in 1969. We passed same-sex legislation in 2004. And here's the kicker, and this is why we're all in this together. Regardless of what an election cycle brings in your country or in our country or in your country, what's important is that civil society and the academy and activists and donors and sponsors and supporters keep working. Because Harvard University just released a study 2 weeks ago that is very important. It's not about getting from the 5 countries down to 0 that would kill those of us who are LGBTQ here if we were in their country to 0, though that's important. It's not just about getting from 70 countries down to 0 where homosexuality is still illegal down to 0. Most people come out when the state legalizes same-sex marriage, because it sends a cue that there's enough links to the majority society that we can all belong. And we are and one of the things the Prime Minister will say is that we are stronger because of our diversity, not in spite of it. And we fundamentally believe in Canada that human rights are indivisible and universal, and that includes LGBTQ2 people. And why the 2? It refers to Indigenous peoples. the two-spirited peoples, who for millennia felt they had two spirits. And in the last 20 or 30 years, it has become an umbrella term for anybody in the LGBTQ community who's also Indigenous. And that's an important piece that is for us as we move forward in reconciling with Indigenous peoples. I'm thrilled to be here and happy to help in any way I can.
Thank you so much. So I think it's interesting when we're talking about legal protections that we know, and I think you alluded to this, that while obviously the import of having legal protections, that doesn't necessarily ensure how any of us are going to live our lives. So the implementation of the law is not guaranteed just because the law is passed. So, for example, in South Africa, that has one of the best we're embedded in the Constitution, our legal protection, the lived experience of lesbians, particularly black lesbians or gender non-conforming people, is abhorrently violent, where murder and rape is a status quo in that community. And when we look at, I really appreciated on the panel previously talking about the perception of how the vote was going to go and then how the vote in fact went. And I think that that is also a hallmark of how we need to be mindful of, just because we have laws on the books, that may not be how our lived experiences may play out. And so I'm curious to know, while I don't want to be a naysayer, it's also the topic of the panel, how do these shifts, how do you read these shifts in terms of the democracies, not just individually inside of your nation state, right, but writ large? Whether it's specifically in a Colombian UK context, or just your read where you sit, where we all sit globally. I'd love to hear from anybody on the panel.
Well, I'm glad to be, this is my first time also here at the Victory event, and I'm glad to be here, because we really need help and to network and to share experiences and to get political and financial support for everyone. Why? And I think this is not particularly Colombian, but it's a trend across Latin America. And it's precisely because we have achieved so many wins on the legal side that we're now facing an open challenge from society, in which many of these measures, for example, same-sex marriage, is not supported by the majority of the population, is not supported by the majority of the political parties. So now they are saying basically, well, you may be winning in courts, but you will be defeated in the ballot. So we will take you there and we will defeat you there. And we will use our political power to take away the rights that you have won so far. So that's the challenge. That's a challenge in Peru, that's a challenge in Mexico, that's a challenge in Brazil, and that's also a challenge in Colombia. So now is when we need to understand how to do not only strategic litigation, but strategic politics. Both socially, networking and working with other groups, and finding that who are they all, that we are all in this together. Who, right? We need to find the who's, and we need to find the means, and definitely we need to step up in the political arena too. So I am the first LGBT senator in Colombia, I'm sure, and I will ensure that I'm not the only one next time, which is in 2018. And also in the House of Representatives, in which here we have Angelica, which is the first open lesbian also in the House of Representatives in Colombia. So we need to work, gathering international experience and support. We need to work on broadening the social support that we have, the social basis that we can actually, get to and get help from. And we need to set up our agenda and our priorities in a way that have the chance to build a new majorities. In the case of Colombia, for example, we recently have, like you said, we hold the referendum asking people, do you want to bring peace to this country? And the no wins. And the no wins, not because many of the people don't want to bring peace to Colombia, but because the hate to the guerrilla is so high that many people in the right were able to build up on this hate. And many other people were able to build a new majority, right? So, for example, Christians and religious base in Catholic Church, for example, people were told at the peace referendum, look, you better vote no, because if you vote yes, the LGBT people who's going to convert your sons to LGBT people, that will happen if you vote yes, which makes no sense, of course. But they were able to use all these arguments, this gender ideology, right? You're going to convert our sons. You're going to put in danger the traditional family, the traditional values. So instead of, I would say, instead of sort of putting on a defense, right? Putting on the defense, I think, okay, I think what we need to do is to understand and to use the same language that they are using. So you people in Latin America, are you worried about the family? Let's talk about the families we have. Let's talk. Not about the ideal type of family that we want to have or that you want to have. Let's talk about the families. For example, the Colombian families, in which more than 21,000 women are sexually assaulted every year in the actual ideal families we have, right? 75% of those women are under 14 years. The perpetrators are their fathers, their stepfathers, their close relatives, right? In 80% of the cases. And in 80% of the cases, the sexual violation or the sexual assault is committed in the house of the victim. Meaning we need to protect our girls and our women from their families, from their ideal families and houses. Do you want to talk about families? Let's talk about families. These are the families we have. And these are the challenges we're facing. So the problem with lying and distorting and all this trend that we use the way fear and prejudice is used in politics is not only that it is immoral, it's basically that they are taking away us and the policy making and the policy execution from our actual priorities. They are taking away us from the facts, from the actual problems that affect actual people in current life. So instead of talking only about our rights, I think if we just don't go away afraid and defensive from the debate, but we openly enter into the debate with the facts, with the proposals, we reach out other people, and we will be able to reach the networking and the political base and the electoral base we need to take together.
The first part of the question, are laws enough? I mean, clearly not. You need the full suite of legal protections for LGBT people. But that isn't enough. It's necessary but not sufficient. Because in the end, what you have to do is ensure that there is cultural change and that people are able to live their lives in a way that ensures those rights without recourse to the law or the mechanisms of enforcement. And so politicians need to know where there is a need to give a law and where there's a need to give a lead. And there are areas in the UK that may not need legislative change, but where we still need change because we need cultural change in sport, where we need more role models, particularly in Premier level soccer. In schools, where we still have children being bullied because of their sexuality, we need to do more in schools and in business too. So it's in civil society as well as areas that politicians can reach. The cultural change still has to be effective, and you have to guard against the reversal of that. And then on the second part of the question, which was about what were the forces at work, and I could reflect on the forces that were at work in the Brexit debate. And I referred to the nativist views the populist views, there is the thing that I would observe is, firstly, populism wins when conventional politics has failed people, and we have to be humble about that. Populist politicians are able to succeed because conventional politicians are not offering the people what they want. And the answer to it must be to have brave, courageous, compelling, persuasive and honest politicians who do give the people what they want. And if they don't get that, then there will be the danger of populism arising and offering apparently easy solutions. Where people are able to say, you know, you've listened to all these people for so long that haven't given you what you want, I can give you something else. And it is true that in the wake of the global economic downturn, there been millions of people globally in the Western world who've been left behind, whose incomes collapsed, who felt that the forces of globalization have not worked for them, and they have felt dispossessed. And in our referendum campaign, we completely underestimated that. So we thought that a message of economic success would resonate across the whole country, and it did not. And that has been a failure of our conventional politics, not to appreciate that people were left behind. And the second thing I would observe is that there is no doubt that social media has amplified all of this in a way that I think is potentially very damaging. Social media is wonderful for networking, for family connections, for the way we transact, for campaigns and so on, but it's also a phenomenon that unlocks anger, that doesn't mediate the news in any way at all, and where a lie can be halfway around the world at the click of a mouse. And we've seen that in the campaigns that have been run, populist campaigns, whether it was on Brexit or elsewhere, where things that frankly are not true are no longer mediated by a responsible media, but actually go straight into people's mobile phones and into their homes, and also allows a kind of debate that isn't moderated by normal social restraint of people hearing alternate views. They're only hearing views of people who are on their own side. And again, conventional politics has to think hard about how we deal with that. And we need to think hard about how we deal with that when we are trying to promote and protect the rights of a minority.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to add another thing into the mix, and I know that the two of you want to respond, but I don't want it to get lost. When you're talking about a populist politic, when you're talking about this rise of a particular kind of right, it is this isolationist politic, right? So it's this idea that we're going to be only America, we're going to be only Britain, we're only, right? And I think that in this room, and we know, however, that hyper-nationalism always has an international or global agenda, in fact, right? So even if we thought, if Trump was only going to stay in the United States, to be frank, we could kind of take him, But we know that's not only where his agenda lies. But I want to challenge us a little bit here, that as LGBTQI and two-spirited folks, we also have a tendency to think that when we're talking about our population, that we aren't also all the other people who are affected by all of these agendas. And so that somehow when we're talking about a queer agenda, we're not talking about black politics, that we're not talking about indigenous politics, that we're not talking about migrant justice, economic justice, racial justice, and in fact we are. And in fact, if we don't, then we also leave the possibility, if we're willing to talk about bipartisan or multi-partisan engagement, we also need to talk about a ground game that includes all of our constituents as well. So I just want to throw that out there, and so now you get to pick up on all of that if you want to, or any part of that.
Well, I guess to the earlier question,
yeah.
I think the world is obviously changing greatly. The economy is changing greatly, and that change is scaring people. People are afraid, and people like Trump were able to repeat people's fears back to them for a long period of time, aided by media and aided by social media. And that fear has been manifesting in racism, in xenophobia, and particularly in Islamophobia. I guess the good news is no one is born racist, or no one is born xenophobic. It's something that you know, in society you adopt over time, and it can also be unlearned. And I think it's unlearned by education, by leadership, and by hope. And the role of all of us in this world, to your point, in this room, is to make sure that we are sharing knowledge amongst our countries, that we are connected. We've been very fortunate in Australia to have groups like Freedom to Marry and the HRC play a key role. Tiernan Brady, who led the Irish Yes campaign, came to Australia to help us get ready for our campaign there. So we've got to close down those borders. But you know, I'm hopeful that I think what's happening should be a big wake-up call for all of us, and I think we need to make sure that we are always connected and sharing that information. But really, you know, in the last Australian election, we elected a group of gay MPs to the House and to the Senate. But the most encouraging new election was Australia's first female Muslim MP, Anne Ali, got elected, and that is so critically important at this time as well. So I think we need to really celebrate and promote diversity in everything that it means, not just LGBTI, but the whole suite.
So trying to get to all of the diversity in those two questions at once, I think what's important and what we're working through is the importance of symbols and substance, and that it takes leadership to do both. Because if you just stay in the province of symbols, it becomes empty rhetoric. And if you're delivering on substantive change and you don't actually have some symbolic wins, then few people will know about it. And you have to move both forward, and it takes a lot of leadership to do that. So it's not enough to just raise the pride flag on Parliament Hill. We also needed and have put legislation on the table in Parliament, in Canada, to add transgender and gender diverse clauses in both the Criminal Code and in the Human Rights Act to do exactly the kind of protection that Nick's talking about, because people need to see themselves in the laws of their land. And Randall Garrison, who's my MP colleague here from British Columbia, has been working on this for a very long time. He's with the New Democratic Party, and his colleague Sherry Benson, also LGBTQ, and 3 members of my caucus, Seamus O'Regan, Rob Oliphant, and Cabinet Minister for the Treasury Board, Scott Bryson, have all been working on these issues behind the scenes. And to Nick's point, it's multi-partisan. And I'm entirely on board for your international group, so just let us know how to sign up. What's also important is that our leaders, and this is where the United States becomes really important, you have the largest megaphone on the planet when it comes to getting media around the world. You have Hollywood, you have all of the social media channel, I mean, you own it, you run it. China's competing. But this is a time where civil society and Hollywood and creatives need to step up. I'm also Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Canadian Heritage. And I can tell you, we're trying to do what you did in the UK in the last 6 years, Nick, which is to double your cultural outputs in 6 years. There's £9 million a day that is made in the United Kingdom now in the cultural industries. We're trying to do that now in Canada. This is where civil society and groups like yours and leaders need to find their voices, because leadership is not only in the hands of the politicians, it's in your hands. And it's the hands of the organizations that you form. And I am totally inspired by what Victory Institute is doing. And I'll talk to Randall and see how we can bring more of this to Canada. I hope I can get to Miami for the election campaign. And who knows, maybe we can even host this someday in Canada.
To wrap up, we have about 5 or 6 minutes. I just facilitated a conversation with 17 governments, and we were talking about what do development agendas look like in a post-Trump era. And a lot of the conversation was about taking U.S. development investment out of the off the table. What if things were divested, as opposed to a sobering thought of what about those development dollars actually invested in against LGBT agendas, or in ways that are antithetical to a lot of the work that we've been doing. I'm curious about, and there was a really robust conversation that was it wasn't all naysaying, right? It was sort of, we have strategies, and or this is what we're afraid of. So kind of, I pose that to you. Where do you see the most, either and, the most hopeful kind of points of contact, either inside of your countries? What are the things that you're most excited about, and or ways that we can be thoughtful about what's happening globally, and or are there any cautionary words that you want to share with the audience?
Well, let me say from my own context that I think we're making history and changing history at this point in Colombia. You know, not every generation has ended a civil war of 53 years long. So we're going to make it. It is hard. It is difficult. Nobody goes away from a civil war, you know, like a happy ending, everybody in consensus. No, it means to defeat the status quo. And the same way that, you know, Trump won't make America white again, which he actually means, I think. You know, no, don't be doubtful. It might be hard, but nobody will make sexist, elite-driven, and latifundia Colombia again, period. And if we need to fight for 2 centuries more to defeat those minorities, which have been ruling the country for centuries and taking advantage of the people for centuries, it may take 2 decades, but we're gonna win, period. If we pursue, if we build the social base we need, if we learn how to engage in politics in a broader sense, and networking with other people. So I think that's the challenge, a generational challenge. This is not a challenge for the next election. This is a work for the next generation, and that's what we're doing.
Well, on the international development agenda, you know, I would prefer to try and be optimistic about this. In the UK, we've just made a major contribution again to the Global Fund to fight HIV/AIDS, malaria and tuberculosis. The Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, played a fantastic role in leading the case for the replenishment of that fund. The UK is now the 2nd biggest contributor. We just contributed over £1 billion to that fund, and we have enshrined in law our commitment to meet the 0.7% GNI international aid target, and so we have reached that target and will be exceeding it in our international development spending. I hope that in the United States, I mean, these issues have certainly until now, they've been subject to bipartisan consensus in terms of international development aid. There's been disagreement about how that money might be spent, but actually there has been a consensus about that. I know that from the work I do on tuberculosis, and I hope that will continue, and that despite the change in administration, that the United States will continue to understand the responsibility it has as the most powerful country in the world to support those that are the neediest in the world. And that is not only the morally right thing to do, but is a sensible thing to do if you want to promote economic development around the world, and it's sensible in security terms as well. So I would prefer to choose to be optimistic about this going forward, and I hope that we can maintain the consensus that has been built about it.
In Australia, I'm really hopeful that we will finally achieve marriage equality, and hopefully within the next 6 months. It's a vote that we can't lose. It is significant for the region, the Asia-Pacific region, because our friends in Taiwan and Vietnam and Nepal are also having campaigns for marriage equality, and they're watching us closely. So we greatly appreciate the support that we've received from so many people in this room as our campaign continues there. That'll be a significant victory for Australia. It's been something that has taken 10 years to achieve. We're also keen to really work more with our regional partners, particularly the Pacific Islands. These are nations where you still have homosexuality is still criminal. So it's important that Australia leads and works with the US and the UK and other partners around the Pacific to make sure that we are able to progress really important LGBTI law reforms in some of the world's most vulnerable countries.
I think what's important to reflect on this is it takes policy that your government wants to see implemented on the ground, and it also takes the moral leadership of leaders in all parts of the political spectrum. And so in the case of Prime Minister Trudeau, and thank you for that shout out, I mean, literally the Prime Minister picked up the phone and over 2 days of calls, got the fund up to $13 billion, reaching out to global leaders, and the UK Prime Minister stepped up as well. And so it's important that leaders do that. It's also important that we be able to tell the story of what's happening on the ground. And I mean, I'm scouring the world right now looking for leadership of countries because I have to advise my Prime Minister on our LGBTQ2 agenda. And the Israeli government just gave $5 million to local organizations inside their country. We don't have such a fund yet. There is no place in the government of Canada where LGBTQ2 issues reside. So guess who gets to come up with that? And I'm honored. It's going to be fun. But when we're talking internationally, we also need to remember that there is the people that have the most power are civil society, because no elected officials can withstand the tsunami of support that comes from the kind of mobilization we're able to do in 2016. And if we want to see USAID, and we want to see the United States continue to engage, it's in your hands. We're going to keep doing our part, and I think it's really exciting to see what's going to come. And I know we work with Colombia and other organizations in the OAS, because rights can be gained and rights can be taken away. And we always need to stay vigilant. And that is what we will be working on. And my last comment is the Prime Minister was at the Organization of la Francophonie. This is all the French-speaking countries in the world in Madagascar. And he spoke in Antananarivo with leaders from a number of African countries and talked about the need to advance LGBTQ2 rights. Not everybody was happy to hear that from a Canadian Prime Minister, but we say it everywhere we go, and we will continue to do so, and we know that we will be in partnership with our American friends doing so. Thank you.